Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we're going to dig into the evolution of JavaScript functions. We'll start with the classic anonymous function and trace our way all the way up to the modern arrow function, so you can finally master all that slick syntax you see in today's code.
So, have you ever been scrolling through some JavaScript code and you see something like this, that little arrow, and you just kind of thought, what on earth is that? If so, you're definitely in the right place. By the end of this, it's all going to make perfect sense.
All right, here's our game plan. We'll kick things off with anonymous functions. Then we'll look at a cool old-school pattern called an IFFE. After that, we're jumping straight into modern arrow functions and their awesome features. And we'll wrap up with the key rules you need to remember.
Okay, so let's start at the very beginning with the idea that makes all of this possible, the anonymous function. And just like the name says, it's a function that has no name. But as you'll see, you can't just drop one anywhere you want.
You might think you could just write this out, right? A function keyword, some parentheses, some curly braces. But nope, if you try to run this, JavaScript is going to throw a syntax error right back at you. That's because a normal function declaration needs a name so it can be called later. A nameless function just floating there on its own, well, it's incomplete.
So how do we fix this? Well, we use something called a function expression. The big idea here is that instead of declaring a function, we treat it like a value, an expression, and we assign it to a variable. This gives our nameless function a name, or at least a handle, that we can actually grab onto and use.
See, the whole trick here is to treat the function like any other value, like a number or a string. By assigning our anonymous function to this constant called sayHello, we're giving the JavaScript engine a reference point. Now it knows exactly where to find that chunk of code when we need it. And then, to actually run it, it's super simple. You just call the variable that's holding the function, you add the parentheses to the end, just like a regular function call, and boom, it invokes the code inside.
Okay, but what if you have a function that you only need to run one time, like right away, and then you want to forget about it? For that, there's a classic JavaScript pattern, the immediately invoked function expression, or, as everyone calls it, an IFFE.
Now this syntax, it looks a little bizarre at first glance, I get it, but it's actually pretty clever. See those first parentheses wrapping the entire function? That tells JavaScript, hey, treat this as an expression, not a declaration. And then the second pair of parentheses at the very end, that's the invoke part. It runs the function right then and there.
So why on earth would you do this? Well, back in the day, this was a super important pattern for keeping your code clean. It prevented you from polluting the global scope. Any variables you declared inside the IIFE were trapped in there, totally private, so they couldn't clash with other scripts on the page.
All right, so that's the old school stuff. Now, let's get to the main event, the modern, sleek, and powerful arrow function, which came to us with ES6. And turning a classic function expression into an arrow function, it's surprisingly easy. Check this out. You start with your function expression. Step 1, just delete the function keyword. Step 2, right after the parameters, you add what we call a fat arrow. That's just an equal sign followed by a greater than sign. And that's it. You're left with a much cleaner, modern arrow function. And look, this isn't just about being lazy and typing less. It's really all about readability, especially when you're dealing with callbacks. Take a look at this timeout example. The classic function on the left is fine, but it's kind of clunky. The arrow function on the right, it's so much cleaner. You can see at a glance what's happening. It's a function, it takes no arguments, and it does one thing.
But wait, there's more. Arrow functions aren't just a pretty face. They have some serious power-ups. And probably the biggest and most useful one is something called implicit return.
Here's the deal with implicit return. The rule is super simple. If your function body is just a single line, a single expression, you can completely get rid of the curly braces and the return keyword. JavaScript is smart enough to see that single expression and will automatically return its result for you.
Just look at the difference here. It's the exact same function doing the exact same thing. On the left, we're using curly braces, so we have to explicitly type return. But on the right, since the entire body is just that one little expression, a plus b, we can drop the fluff and get this incredibly concise single line of code. It's beautiful.
Okay, listen up, because this is the #1 trap people fall into with arrow functions. The second you add curly braces, you turn off implicit return. From that moment on, if you want your function to give back a value, you are responsible for typing the return keyword yourself. And here's what that trap looks like in the wild. This code looks like it should work, right? But because of those curly braces and the missing return, what happens is JavaScript calculates a plus b and then just throws the result away. The function ends up returning undefined. This one little mistake can cause some seriously confusing bugs.
Okay, let's wrap this up by nailing down a few key rules to make sure you've got this syntax mastered.
So when do you need those parentheses around the arguments? It's actually pretty simple. If you have 0 arguments, you need empty parentheses. If you have 2 or more arguments, you need parentheses. The only special case is when you have exactly 1 argument, then the parentheses are totally optional.
So, to quickly recap the big differences, arrow functions are always nameless. They give you that much shorter, cleaner syntax. They have that awesome power of implicit returns for single-line functions. And one last thing, they handle the this keyword in a completely different and often much more intuitive way. But that's a huge topic for another day.
And there you have it. That's the journey from the classic function keyword all the way to the modern arrow. So I'll leave you with this challenge. Go look through some of your own code. Where are you using an old-school function expression that you can now refactor into a cleaner, more readable arrow function? Go give it a try.